Today, in this session, we are going to discuss on the topic rites and ritual in relation to that rites de passage. Scholars have underscored the study of religion in action as essential to understanding of its significance. W. Robertson Smith called mythology as the dogma or sacred lore of antique religions. He held that myth was derived from ritual and that ritual was obligatory, and concluded that study of ancient religions must begin with ritual and traditional usage. The viewpoint of modern expressions is embodied in the statement that whatever is important in social life will receive ritual attention. By ritual expressions, these folkways or values become sanctified and are made to appear important and inviolable. Rites are ceremonies performed by a particular group of people, often for religious purposes. For example, initiation rites, funeral rites, etc. Ritual is a series of actions that are always performed in the same way, especially as part of a religious ceremony. According to Dictionary of Anthropology, the word ritual refers narrowly to prescribed formal acts that take place in the context of religious worship. In this sense, ritual is opposed to theology. Observation and analysis of rituals have been a primary concern of anthropology through its history. For knowing this rites de passage, we have to know something about the classification of group ritual. So most group rituals may be divided into two classes. The first one is those rituals associated with non-periodic, that is critical events or changes occurring in the life cycle of a single individual or a few individuals, which has commonly been called crisis rites. The second one is those rituals associated with fixed cyclic events of direct importance to all the members of the society, called rites of intensification, because they are held to maintain social equilibrium by reinforcing the habitual relation of members of the group. However, this term has not been generally accepted, so a new term, cyclic group rites, has been given. Now, let us discuss about the crisis rites in relation to that the rites de passage. Crisis rites are ceremonies connected with the important, critical, but normally expectable events in the life cycle of the individual, the so-called biological crisis of life: birth, sexual maturity, reproduction, and death. Rituals performed on these occasions have been called rites of passage or rites de passage because they involved transition from one social status to another. The significance to the individuals of rituals associated with the biological crisis of life was first hypothesized by Arnold van Gennep, who coined the expression rites of passage or rites de passage. Van Gennep saw these rites as means by which individuals are eased through difficulties of transition from one social role to another. He contended that all these ceremonials are divided into three consecutive elements called in French separation, merge, and aggregation, which is translated as separation, adjustment or transition, and reintegration. The individual is first severed from his old status, experiences adjustment to the new status during a period of transition, and finally becomes officially established in the position. The first stage is frequently a simulation of that, by which the individual is completely severed from the old way of life. The persons upon whom the rites center are for a time separated socially and often physically from other members of society. The adolescent boy may be strictly separated from the company of women during rites that pass him into manhood. For bride-to-be, social relationships of girlhood abruptly severed by the custom of mock capture, whereby the girl is forcibly taken from her home by the kin of the groom, while her own relatives offer token resistance. The new mother, pubescent boys and girls, and close relatives of a person who has died commonly undergo a period of physical isolation. The period of adjustment or transition may be brief or months long. During this time, the individual's relation with rest of the society is not those of his old status and not as yet entirely those of the new. He is under many restrictions, most of which prohibit him from following otherwise normal activities. Ceremonial during this period often prepare the individual for his new status by giving him instruction in matters that are of common knowledge among the members of the new social group. The third and final step ceremonially and officially restores the individual to normal social life. In this stage, the individual uses visible symbol of his new status: a tattoo, a distinctive style of hair dress, a wedding ring, or whatever of other insignia his society has seized upon. Where the first stage of ritual simulates that, the third stage often symbolizes a new and different life. The individual is sometimes ceremonially born, fed, talked to, and instructed as a newborn child would be, and ceremonially he is made to grow up into the new social status. now discuss the kind of ceremonial attention given to the critical events of the normal life cycle of every individual. Rituals associated with birth in primitive society customarily begin long before parturition. The pregnant woman usually is restricted from having certain food and various other normal activities. When birth seems imminent, she is often isolated and religious acts are performed to ensure an easy and successful delivery. All elements of Van Genep's scheme of rites de passage may be found in old Japanese practices surrounding childbirth. The pregnant woman must abstain from various foods. At the time of confinement, she is isolated from all for 30 days after giving birth, except with the woman who attends her. When the full period has passed, she resumes normal relationship with other members of the community. Birth ceremonies in many primitive societies differ from one another. Among many of the simpler tribal groups, a custom called the covets exists. Although the term covet ordinarily refers to rites observed by the father, the other might follow similar or identical procedure. In the classic form of covets, the father simulates by lying in and observes dietary and other restrictions. In primitive society, sexual maturity approximately marks the transition to adult status. In many societies, this transition is officially recognized by ceremony initiating the child into its adult role. Rites for boys often do not coincide with puberty. Ritual for girls tends more commonly to be held at the time of first menstruation. Further, marriage ceremonies generally are the simplest of all rites connected with events in the life cycle of the individual, and they may include no religious elements. An exchange of gifts between the two families involved in a common feature. In the more complex societies of whether the ceremony is secular or religious, distinctive clothing, hair dress, or other symbols indicative of marriage are used. The classic feature of rites of passage are often most clearly evident in funeral ceremonies. The bereaved refrain from many normal acts. They perform various rites of mourning for prescribed periods, and finally, the funeral and their personal grief are formally ended. Afterwards, they are ritually brought back to normal social relationships. Mention may be made about the life cycle ritual in Meitei community of Manipur. The pregnant woman goes to the temple in the 5th or 7th month of her pregnancy and prays to God for successful delivery. On the 6th day of the childbirth, a ritual ceremony of Shashti Puja for the newly born child is conducted with a local Brahmin by the parents. This is the first observance of ritual ceremony of the child. The ritual ceremony called Nahutpa or ear boring at the age of 3 or 5 is also performed. The transition of sexual maturity is recognized when a ritual ceremony, namely Liming Lauba, is conducted on the boy or the girl. Unless such ritual ceremony is observed, the boy or the girl cannot enter into wedlock. In the case of boy, a ritual ceremony called Lugun Thangba may also be performed. The performance of marriage between a boy and a girl is done with the observance of religious ritual at the residence of the bride, followed by a feast given by the parents. In the case of death, a series of ritual ceremonies are observed. The dead body is cremated by giving pinda by the eldest son or head of the family with chanting mantras by the Brahmins. On the 5th or 6th day, the ritual ceremony of Asti Sanchoy is performed and the Shraddha is also performed on the 13th or 14th day of the death of the individual. The observance of that anniversary, known as Phiroi, is the last ritual ceremony of an individual, and on this day a feast is offered to the invitees so that the deceased soul may rest peacefully in the heavenly abode. To conclude, we can say that rites of passage are the ways in which human being indicates transformation from one social status to the next, and it includes irregular private ceremonies commemorating personal milestones such as birth, maturity, marriage, and death.